Hello and welcome back to Fox's Focus, part of the Why Always She podcast empire. I am your host, Matt Clough, and as always, I am joined by Charlie Parks. Hi, Charlie. How are you doing?
Hello there. I'm good, thank you.
Yeah. How's the week been in Leicesterland? You were on the radio earlier this week with Zoe McGrady on BBC Radio Leicestershire.
Correct.
Yeah.
Just Leicester. I don't know if it's technically all of Leicestershire, but
I think it is. Yeah, let's get into it, shall we? Without further ado. So it has been quite a busy week in terms of Leicester news. We had originally intended for this to be just quite a sort of a straightforward discussion on the running of the women's team, the management of the women's team. However, there's been a fair bit going on, so I thought we'd take a bit more of a grab bag approach and yeah, just get your thoughts on what's been going on. So since we last recorded, which was about 5 seconds after it was announced that Julie Thibault was leaving, we've had an entire week of no more departures, which has been a bit of a novelty. I think it's probably been the first week of the summer where we've not had some kind of transfer speculation or confirmed departures. Not only that, but we have signed, well, we've confirmed 2 signings. We think there's another one in the offing as well, but we'll get into them. Overall, a positive week, do you think, in terms of gearing up for the WSL2?
I mean, yeah, for sure. The fact that we've brought in 2 players and not announced any departures is, as you've said, feels like a first.
Yeah.
In months, probably. You kind of wait for that sort of, I don't know. Well, it was Sunday, wasn't it, last week when we announced that Julie Thibault had left, so maybe we'll finish recording in a bit and there'll be another one and we'll be like, we spoke too soon. But no, I think Libby Bance was announced just before I went on the radio, actually.
Yes.
They must be doing this. Maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe they're just doing it around me and my schedule.
Sort of
so
like
I've got stuff to talk about.
Walter White in Breaking Bad. Like, all of this is
about me. And then we announced Paulina
Nystrom.
Is it Paulina? Paulina Nystrom?
Yes, but she goes by Pau.
Which I like.
I was gearing up to make some kind of line about, you know, in the week that it's announced that King Power are potentially selling the club, a new kind of power has arrived for the women's team.
I mean, yeah, and obviously on the last episode, I was calling out for us to sign a striker. So to see us having signed a player in a forward position is incredibly positive. And I think there seems to be a good vibe around the squad. I think so. They went up to Liverpool to play a friendly yesterday. We lost, but you know, it's WSL team. It's pre-season, and there was pictures on Instagram of them all going out in fancy dress. Asmita was dressed as Ali G, which I'm absolutely obsessed with. It's brilliant.
I saw Mario and Luigi as well, but I can't remember.
I think Mario and Luigi was Liv Mack and Missy Goodwin.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, Emma Janssen, I think. And Missy Goodwin was, I think, dressed as Yoshi or something.
Right.
Something Nintendo. I can't remember. I won't look it up. So, yeah, like, seems to be relatively positive. There, again, get through another week without any departures. Like, I think we were crashing out slightly on Friday because Admisa had put on a Instagram story that she was in Liverpool, and I was like, oh god, she's gone to Everton, and Comunicado Oficial incoming. But as we've examined, as we've noted multiple times, the club is not communicating when we have friendlies or anything like that. So I found out that we'd played Liverpool in a friendly via one of those aggregator accounts on Instagram posting about how Marie Herbinger had scored her first goal for Liverpool after coming back from her ACL.
Yeah.
Congrats to you, Marie Herbinger. I genuinely mean that. I'm not
like
trying to be salty,
what
but
a sad little life.
And I was
Marie.
like, and then I was watching the video. I was like, I recognise that kid. Oh, well, thanks for letting us know again, Leicester. But yeah. So then it all sort of made sense then.
Yes, well, we can get into those 2 signings a little bit. So yeah, Libby Bance, she was under contract at Brighton but hadn't really played for them very much. She's a defensive midfielder, and yeah, she left Brighton at the end of June and has been, it sounds like, well, you know, basically waiting to make a decision on where she ended up. Signs a 1-year contract, so probably a sort of a bit of a kind of, you know, backup, a bit of a punt for both the player and the club, where they're like, you know, it doesn't seem like the speed of which she's been signed, the length of the contract, doesn't seem like that necessarily she's a huge piece of the puzzle, but always good to have depth. As we were just saying last week, we just needed some bodies, and not saying that's all she is, but yeah, it seems like she comes in with probably a bit of a point to prove and a bit of WSL to experience there as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, definitely a welcome addition.
But yeah, I agree. Like if you look at obviously I think Jessu and Jessie Stapleton have had slightly longer contracts, if I'm right in thinking 2029, maybe 2030 for one of them, if I imagine that.
Yeah, I think so, 2 or 3 years.
And I think Sarah Malin is
Mailing, I think, was a 2 year, yeah.
2 or 3 year, yeah. I can't remember. I don't know what year it is anyway, but yeah, and then I think, you'd probably see Libby Vance's contract and think she's probably not part of the longer plan, but maybe both parties are going to see how the season goes and then review from there, really, I guess.
From Bance to Nystrom, that feels like again, no disrespect to Libby Bance, but that feels like a bit more of a significant signing. She has been she's been playing in Sweden. She's half Swedish, half Finnish. She's come through the Swedish age groups and is now a fully fledged international for Finland. So she changed her allegiance when it came to getting a full international call-up. But yeah, she's been playing for Häcken, obviously massive pedigree there in the women's game. So 2-year deal, again, it seems that she's a bit more of a sort of perhaps a long-term signing. We know famously, generally looking at our forward options, we're very, very, very depleted. So it feels like she may be coming in as the intended starting striker basically for the team.
I would certainly hope so.
Wouldn't surprise me.
I think, my only slight concern there is you get players come over from the Damallsvenskan and some of them are just brilliant, hit the ground running. Some struggle a bit more. I think Erik Stottier was absolutely tearing it up in the Damallsvenskan, and then she came to us and struggled.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that might be more to do with us than her, but she's now gone to Malmo.
Yeah.
I've sort of vaguely had an eye on what Malmo are up to, but I'm afraid I haven't got any detail off the top of my head. But anyway, the point being there is, I think we probably spoke about it on the main podcast at some point in January when Spurs had their massive Scandi influx that you'll normally see, particularly in January, you'll see players come over from Sweden in particular because their league ends.
It's a calendar year league.
Yeah. So they get, a lot of players come on a free quite often as well. So I think the only concern really, I mean, it's one of them, isn't it? If they come in January, they're at the end of their season. And then if they come in the summer, they're mid-season.
Yeah. So
it's they're always going to be slightly out of sync, which is, like I say, sometimes doesn't matter. Look at Signe Gaupset, for example, at Spurs, but sometimes I feel like it just sort of takes them a little minute to get used to, get into the rhythm again. Because obviously if you're mid-season instead of pre-season, or at the end of the season instead of halfway through the season, you're probably in a different physical state and you're in a different mindset and mentality as well. So that sounds very negative, but I'm obviously really buzzing and positive that we've signed her. Had good numbers for Häcken last season, and then obviously, as I say, she's technically been this is mid-season for her. So I think she scored a few goals and got a few assists this season already.
Yeah.
So that's good. We've been seriously lacking in the goals department. So have someone who's got some numbers on the board somewhere is good. I just think we needed resource and we needed some solid options in that area. And I think obviously Häcken are a really good team. They won the Europa Cup. I think the hero of that campaign was her contemporary Felicia Schroeder, who we've spoken about on the main podcast, gone to Real Madrid, but she obviously played a part. And to have won a cup competition, European Cup competition, I think she's probably, I can't remember off the top of my head, probably won the league with Häcken. That's good experience, isn't it?
Yeah,
for sure. Sorry, that was really rambling.
No, it was all good. And the last finish forward Leicester had worked out all right. It certainly started very well, and then if we can get some of that Rantala first season kind of action and not the subsequent 2 years, that would be, that would go down very nicely.
Which that's not her fault. Like,
no, of course.
Very unlucky with her injuries. But.
Yeah, just so a tiny bit more. So I realised after we recorded last week, one player we had kind of overlooked was Amelia Pelgander, who she's sort of been in this weird never zone almost since we signed her. You know, she was brought in the same window midway through Willie Kirk's last full season.
Yes.
The same time we signed like Yuka Mamiki and Sari Takarada and a couple of others as well. And she got a few minutes in that first half a season, looked to my eye pretty good. Again, defensive midfielder, so quite a lot of competition for those slots in the squad at the time. You know, Kaiman was playing there a bit, obviously Sam Tierney, Takarada, you know, quite a lot of congestion in there. So she's obviously a young player. She's then basically been out on loan ever since, various loans. And it's, like you say, she's been playing in Scandinavia, so there's been weird sort of, she'll go for a full season, but it's not a British full season of the calendar. So, and yeah, again, this is going to become a recurring theme we say on this podcast, but Leicester aren't the best at communicating this sort of information, what's going on. So she is back, she is training, she is playing in pre-season. We're not entirely sure what the situation is with her contract because there's, you know, differing sources online, some saying she's out of contract now, but the fact she is back and playing in pre-season sort of suggests that, you know, she may have signed a new contract, she may have extended a deal, she may have still been under contract. Whatever it is, it seems like she's back and will presumably be involved this season as well. So that is an extra player we've got on the docket.
Yeah, I mean, that's positive, isn't it? Like you say, we have no confirmation at the moment that she's still a Leicester player. She's not listed anywhere as a Leicester player.
Yeah, but she's not on the website or anything, is she? But she's there.
Like featuring heavily in pre-season content. So you would imagine, considering that they managed to sort of skillfully skirt around various players who had left, you know, they'd skirted around with the photography a little bit. You would imagine that they would be quite careful if Palgander wasn't going to be sticking around to like not feature her.
Yes.
So...
And yeah, as Mita Ale is good friends with her, she's been posting loads of photos with her. So again, it feels like if she wasn't truly still a Leicester player who was going to feature this season, it feels like there would have been some kind of chicanery there to keep her out of the sort of relative spotlight of the Leicester City Women social media.
Yeah, the other possibility is I'm just looking at her Instagram, but because what else am I supposed to do in this situation? Is she doesn't have a team listed on her Instagram bio. So I suppose the other explanation is that she doesn't have a team at the moment, and we've just been like thrown her
sort of giving her an opportunity to keep fit.
Just said like, come and train with us, come and train in a proper club environment. You know, we've sent you out on loan for pretty much the entire time of your contract with us, so it's the least we can do. So just bring you back in from the cold a little bit. I don't know. Who knows?
I think that is a possibility.
Until we get official communication from the club, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, so speaking of, sort of slightly obfuscated transfer news and generally an occasional kind of bizarre delay for no apparent reason for the club announcing things, currently on Getty Images, the most recent tranche of training photos shows who appears to be Poppy Pritchard in training for Leicester as well. So she is under contract at Man City. She's been out on a few loans. She was most recently out at Celtic. She is a young forward. I've seen a couple of accounts, City accounts, that is, basically commenting on the fact that she's clearly not at pre-season with City. You know, she's not in the squad basically. So yeah, it seems like that is going to be the next kind of incoming we announce. Yeah, again, it's a bit bizarre to be finding out about transfers this way. But again, have you any thoughts on her? I mean, she's very young. She hasn't got a huge track record in terms of scoring goals, but she is a forward. And again, we know it's an area of the pitch we desperately need reinforcements in.
Yeah, like I say, we don't know for sure until there's been an official communication, but let's be honest, it's out there in the public domain on Getty Images. Anyone can go and look at those photos, and it's listed in the caption. That's who it is on 2 separate occasions. So it'd be a bit of a weird error to make if it wasn't her.
Yeah. If it's not her, it's also someone we don't recognise.
Well, exactly.
We've been doing this long enough.
So, I mean, I don't know loads about her either. I think she's been on loan at Durham. She's been on loan at Celtic. So, again, WSL2 experience. Obviously, if she's come through City, you know.
Good pedigree, you'd imagine.
Yeah, you would hope so. And I've heard the name because, obviously, the association with City. So, that's about all I know about her.
Yeah.
But, again, if it is somebody potentially, like you say, who's been, sounds horrible to say this, but like shopped around a bit, struggled to find a landing spot outside of their sort of parent club. I think she, like, for example, last season she was on loan at Durham and then went to Celtic, so she's been sort of like
she's also
around
been
a little
at Palace and Newcastle.
So
she started her career at Durham and then moved to City.
So somebody similar to Libby Bance, who, like I say, might have a bit of a point to prove, might have a bit of hunger there, like wanting to sort of put herself in the shop window sort of thing. I'm here for it. But again, we should say, like, probably there's not, we probably say, like, for legal reasons, that there's not been an official communication from the club. But again, this is out there in the public domain. Like, it's on Getty Images. If you don't want us to find out, don't let it be put on Getty Images.
Yeah. Or, announce it.
Or announce
it when you sign a player. Yeah, she has, like you said earlier just then, she has been playing for the England under-19s. Wikipedia has her record as 13 goals in 13 appearances. That obviously, that's kind of subject to human editors, so that might not be fully up to date, but pretty good numbers there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of rounds up this week's transfer business. I think, I'm kind of hoping that this is something we have to do every week as we get more and more players in, but let's see. Moving on to sort of the other big piece of news for the week then is that after a pretty tumultuous few years, it's been announced that this week that basically King Power, the owners of Leicester City and also Leuven, are basically offering their entire football portfolio up for sale. The numbers being quoted is about £200 million. I think it's come as a bit of a surprise because up until quite recently, Top, who is technically the owner now, he has been quite bullish in basically saying they would only consider selling the club once they'd kind of effectively righted the wrongs that they admit that it's down to them. Basically, until the men's team is back on the up and up, presumably in the Championship at least, and looking forward to trying to push for the Premier League again, they didn't want to sell. Part of that would have been financial because obviously this is basically the lowest ebb of King Power's ownership on the men's side. Bit of an odd time to sell if you're trying to maximise the value there, but I think a lot of fans would say it's been a few years coming now. I think we've mentioned previously that just purely on the women's side of things, but I think it applies to the men's side as well, that it's the hierarchy at the top of the club. I know Lee Billiard is a relatively new appointment for the women's team, but it just feels like things have got quite stale. Maybe there's some people who, if you had a fresh pair of eyes on things, just coming into the club afresh, people like John Rudkin, who's been subject to a lot of criticism on the men's side, it feels like perhaps the club has kind of, and I think that a theme of Top's ownership has probably been loyalty to a fault, and I think that's unfortunately been linked to a lot of the issues that the club has then subsequently had. So just on the women's side of things, there's all sorts of talk about how it's a relatively good deal in terms of the money being offered. I think compared to, Jeff Bezos has just bought a 30% stake in Liverpool and the comparative numbers involved there to actually be able to buy an entire, technically 3 football clubs for about £200 million would be pretty good deal, really. I think the most kind of important stuff on the women's side is, well, firstly to note that the women's team and the men's team are still part of the same club. So Leicester have never done the sort of, if you're being cynical about it, the sort of PSR creative accounting mode where they effectively sell the women's team or sell a stake in the women's team, and often they're kind of effectively selling it to themselves, but it means they're allowed to, for accounting purposes, count it as a a sale, as an asset that the club has been able to shift and then get money in to help fund the men's team, basically. So the women's team is still part of that conversation. And then, yeah, I think all of the reporting around the brochure as well, as in the brochure that's been put out for potential investors, is that as well as the men's team and obviously the King Power, the land around it, it comes contingent on buying the women's team, as well as Seagrave, which is the men's training ground, Beaver Drive as well. So it's all being marketed as a one big package, which personally I feel is promising, because I think the danger would be for the women's team that, and particularly if they had already kind of, like I say, PSR sold it off kind of thing, the danger would be that, an investor could come in and say, I'll give you 150 million. I'm not interested in the women's team. Forget about it, sort of thing. It does feel like, at least in a legacy sort of sense, that there is a bit of a protection there for the women's team. Hopefully it's a part of the conversation where, any prospective owner would need to have that, as part of their plan. That's me talking a lot. What are your immediate thoughts about the news and what it may mean for the women's team?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you say, it feels like we should clarify for listeners. I think people who have been listening to this podcast for long enough will know that we don't have a personal relationship with the club, like in terms of like history supporting the men's side. We didn't come to Leicester Women as a result of being lifelong Leicester Men fans, and then we started watching women's football. You're a Bolton men's fan. I didn't have a men's team before.
Didn't support
other than like I was brainwashed as a child to support Walsall and just mainly hate Wolves.
Yeah,
I didn't have a men's team, so we have no sort of previous relationship with Leicester City Football Club other than supporting the women's team. So, but I think as you get more and more into football and into the level of detail that we are following the club, as in the team, like I guess the club as well. Caught myself yesterday checking the score for the men's team and being like, for fuck's sake, they've conceded late again, and here we go again.
We know they're ultimately, as much as the women's team is its own thing, we know that the men's team, unfortunately, beholden is very, very to that. To that.
And but I think I can definitely sympathise and understand what I'll call proper Leicester fans, like in terms of being lifelong fans of the club and their frustration with the ownership, the board, and the sort of hierarchy there, because it's just been an absolute disaster, hasn't it? Kind of the last few years,
the last 5 years. I mean,
it's just been a pretty unmitigated disaster in terms of, like they say, the free fall that they've had, and just like things like like the squad, on the men's side, the squad, just like these players that are being paid astronomical amounts and they're just not performing on the pitch. The revolving doors of the managers, like what's the identity, what's the thing? And I think as much as it's kind of felt like, to me, at times, maybe like psychologically, maybe it's because of the fact that up until last season, like the women were still in the top flight, whereas the men weren't. Like it's always felt like the women were sort of a bit, I think I've used the word ring fence. So like almost like a separate entity, but within the whole structure of the club. But I think this is a very clear signal that obviously the club doesn't see it like that. It's a one club, what everyone would call a one club mentality. Like, and I think about Everton, for example, when the Friedkin Group bought Everton, there was a big thing about the women's team getting the investment as part of that as well. And that was obviously not knowing as much about that deal that went through. Clearly the women's team was part of the package and they benefited from the sale.
Yes.
They got a load of investment. They got given Goodison. Like,
they signed high for Leicester's team.
They signed high for Leicester's team. Yeah, they made some really good signings. It feels like they're really building a real project there, which I feel like we've been Leicester. The noise is coming out of Leicester Women has been like, and then whichever new signing, whenever we make a new signing, they say that they do say the same things, don't they? Like it's very much like it's a really ambitious club.
Yeah, I'm
really happy to be part of the project, but it feels like
facilities always get mentioned.
It feels like we've been saying project, but we've at what point I'm not getting project from it, and it's what you said. Like I've done a bit of reading up about. I knew bits and bobs about how the hierarchy and the leadership of the women's team worked, but I've just done a bit more reading about it to prepare for this. And so Lisa Pearce was the director of the women's team from 2022 to 2024. Willie Kirk was originally brought in as director of football for women and girls, but then when we got relegated back down to the WSL2 championship, as it was known then, in 2022, the club shit the bed, sacked the manager, and said to Willie Kirk, can you be manager?
Basically, yeah.
So they didn't fill the director of football post then, so it was just this Lisa Pearce overseeing both the business side and the footballing side of the women's team. She would have brought Amandine in. She would have been the one who signed players like Ruby Mace. So clearly, I think was a net positive on the team, and that's when, to me, it felt like a project under Amandine. She stepped down at the end of 2024. She's now CEO of like World Netball. So don't begrudge her going off to pursue that opportunity. And then we just didn't replace her. We just brought in Lee Billiard as director of football. Lee Billiard essentially reports into John Rudkin and Kevin Davis as the CEO and the CFO, as in chief footballing officer, not chief financial officer. So for me, that says to me like how much accountability is there from Lee Billiard to the hierarchy. How much do Rudkin and knowing the absolute shit show they've got on the men's side, how much time and energy do they afford to Lee Billiard and the women's team, or how much do they just give him autonomy? The fact that Passmore is still in a job, given the disaster of last season, like tells me that there's something somewhere where, I don't know if lacking accountability is the right thing, but like someone's not looking closely enough at this. Like, and the fact that, I think we've spoken on the main podcast on, before we launched this, when we did the odd Leicester focus episode about why Amandine McKell was sacked. The fact that happened, it just feels like there's a mismatch somewhere, or a missing link, or like I say, is there enough direction? Because if we look at it, it's just Lee Billiard, and then it goes all the way up to the not to the top as in top, but as into Rudkin and Davis. So it's like, do we really think that they are sitting down with Lee Billiard on a regular basis to discuss the business and the direction of the women's team? And this thing like, where are the goals for I don't mean literal goals, I mean figurative goals. Like, where are the goals, the objectives for the women's team coming from? Who's overseeing this? Who's driving this? And I think, if a change in ownership forced a bit of a shake-up of the hierarchy, and I can only see that as a positive for the women's team, really. Because I don't feel like Lee Billiard has given me any reason to be anything but critical of him in terms of like what he's done so far as director of football. Under his leadership, we have sacked the best manager that team has ever had, and then been relegated, and then lost a shitload of players.
I think,
and then this far into the summer, when there's so much business gone on elsewhere, we're still down however many players from last season. And so I'm looking at that situation, and I'm like, who am I? Who do I need to be pointing the finger at here? Where does the buck stop for this failure?
Yes. I mean, I think we will unpack this more in another episode. I know we're sort of, again, pushing up against time, and I with it being quite a news-heavy week, I didn't want to dedicate this entire episode to this discussion, but totally echo everything you said there. I think, the fact that Amandine was let go, and there was, talk about sort of performance and all this kind of stuff. It feels like she was held to a completely, whoever, whether it was Billiard's decision, whether it was the club, it feels like a sort of Billiard thing to me, just because there was a lot of chat about him coming in and, conducting a review, which apparently took all summer and meant we didn't do anything until like 3 days
to
before
be fair
the season
to
begins.
Him, he wasn't appointed until like who fucking knows with the speed of how we announced things. But I don't think
he's in training at the moment. I've seen him. I've seen photos.
I feel like I remember him not being announced until like June. So when did he actually come in? When did he actually get time to, like I say, I'm aiming my criticism at him, I guess, in the main, because he's the only one that I've heard anything from, seen anything from. This is what I mean. Where does the buck stop? How much responsibility lies with him for what's happened, and how much responsibility is coming from above him.
Yeah.
It's too murky. And like another thing, it's like this season, going into this season, like I say, the noises coming out of everybody is that we want to get straight back into the WSL. Okay, well then why have we let a load of players go then? Like, I don't know, like obviously some of them will quite rightly may have had relegation clauses, may have had like release clauses, etc., and may have been quite rightly pushing for the move. But how many other players were maybe willing to stick around, like maybe Julie Tebow, and we've gone, no, do you know what? Who has said, no, we're going to sell X, Y, and Z?
Someone is accepting these bids.
Because we need a bit of money.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about the wider project, which is to get the fucking women's team back into the WSL and actually progressing rather than just sort of circling the drain every season and now sinking into WSL 2. And if you're not careful, you know, these teams are becoming ambitious. They've got Premier League money. Yeah. You could even sink lower than WSL 2.
Totally. So, you know, we have literally seen this happen on the men's side, haven't we? You know, they got relegated out of the Premier League. They did the sort of classic parachute payments, bounce back.
We'll be fine.
Relegated again it'll all be okay. And they're now in League One. And, you know, but like I say, we will.
I think we could do another hour on this.
We could definitely could. I think, you know, I totally agree that, you know, for me, that the sort of the starting point is, well, you held Amandine. Yeah, I think we can both openly say we were both very much Amandine fans. I think
most of the fan base was.
I think they were. You know, I know there was some grumbling early on when, you know, but I think, to be honest, I think there was a lot of people who were looking at it from the outside, hadn't really hadn't appreciated how bad the injuries were, and were just sort of being like, oh well, she's rubbish.
Yeah, or like she must have been sacked for performance reasons because they finished 10th.
Well, I just meant during her actual time. That's the only time I heard of you know, real criticism
I think there was some fans who were like say, potentially not recognising how bad the injury crisis was. And then it's quite a Marmite style of football, I think, Amandine's.
Yeah.
And if you like more expansive football, she's probably not for you.
Yeah.
We both you're a Bolton men's fan. Big Sam was your glory years. You like
I like
limp it up to the big man.
I like teams that score goals and win matches. And history tells us Amandine was a hell of a lot better than what we had last season.
Well, precisely. So. And so, I mean, but I think to certainly the end of the season, when against all odds we had, like I say, finished 10th, which sounds shit, but
we finished above Spurs.
And we had our best points tally. We had our best number of goals scored despite all of our injury issues. And I think basically every fan was on board with the Amandine project.
And I think crucially the results were getting better.
Yeah, and I think it sounded like, you know, we've heard from like Sophie Howard, for example, that there was a bit of a learning curve for the players, or potentially a bit of disconnect between the staff and the players. But it felt like that had started to work itself through. Again, maybe it hadn't. Maybe that's why she was let go. But again, it comes down to, I think, everything that we're doing here. I mean, you're never going to know exactly what goes on behind closed doors in a football club, are you? Whether you're fucking Leicester or Man United.
Yeah.
But Man United is probably a bad example because they're
Chelsea, Man City.
Man United are probably the most covered football club in the world. So it's, you know, probably the most scrutinised football club in the world. So that's probably not the best example. But I just think there's too much opacity around what is the direction. Like I say, who does the book start with? Why are things done? Why are decisions made? What is the goal? What is the actual realistic, achievable goal every season?
Yeah.
And where are we going with this women's team?
Yeah.
There's not enough clarity.
No, I agree. And I think, you know, that's, again, I promise we will get into this in a lot more depth, but, you know, I think there's all sorts of threads you can pull out there. You know, I've said many times, I still can't tell you what kind of football Passmore is trying to play.
I don't think he knows, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, quite possibly. You know, I think if you're holding him to the standards that Amandine was apparently held to, why is he still in post?
That's exactly what I mean. It's like, where is the responsibility? Where is the accountability?
Exactly. And that brings us back
I'll
to
say it again, where does the book start?
Yeah. Well, and you know, again, I think this can be our last point on this, but, you know, bringing us back to the King Power news, again, one of the criticisms on the men's side of things has been, you know, like I say, Top has probably been loyal to a fault. You know, there's been a lot of criticism of John Rudkin and his kind of general running of the club and the transfer business particularly, and some of the wages handed out. And I want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but like you say, with the lack of clarity, with the lack of communication, it just feels like Rudkin has been tarred with this, jobs for the boys brush a lot. And, some of the signings have felt like that. Some of the appointments have felt like that. That, again, the lack of accountability. And then you see Amandine, who wasn't Lee Billiard's pick, like you say, getting shoved out the door. And then next summer, Passmore, who, let's be honest, made us worse in every single department. And yet he's still in a job. And it doesn't, I'm willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, but again, the lack of communication, the lack of kind of sort of activity around the club and engagement with the fans, it just sort of feels like if the shoe fits, if it is jobs for the boys, then...
What's the saying? If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck.
Yeah, but it's...
Matt, I don't think you need to pull your punches on this. I don't think we're going to have anyone listening to us who's going to be in defence of the Leicester City ownership or board, so I wouldn't worry about pulling your punches too much.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we can leave that there. I think if anything is to move on the ownership side of things, it's probably going to be a relatively slow process. I would, we're not going to see any tangible benefits or changes to anything. Certainly not this summer. No one's going to be able to buy the club, review the women's team, do whatever they want to do with it in the time now between the window ending and all that kind of stuff. But it's definitely one to keep an eye on, because I think it's overall the fact that the women's team is mentioned so and featured so heavily in the sale proposal is a good thing.
I was quite pleasantly surprised that they were mentioned quite heavily in the reporting. I say heavily, but like they were mentioned in the reporting, because like you're just so used to, I think, not just as a Leicester Women fan, as a women's football fan, of reading big news about big business at football clubs and just not hearing about the women's team. So
or they're a line at the bottom of the article saying, "Oh, the women's teams are just a waste of money and it's losing £1 million a year."
And then, but in one respect, it was quite depressing, because it was like a BBC Sport like Instagram like quick summary of the story, like scroll through like images, and it was like something about like valuation of its struggling teams. It was like teams plural. And I was like, oh god, remember when we used to be the better team in that ecosystem?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this time last year they would have been saying Leicester Women are up for sale, and also
the men.
Part of the package is this struggling men's team, this ailing men's team with... Right, so that was a bit kind of...
It was probably a bit longer than we meant it to be, but I think there's a lot of discussion there.
There's a lot of news flying around. Yeah, like I say, once if we have a quieter week this week, I think the next topic we will tackle is the managerial situation and what we think about that. But who knows? Maybe we'll be sat here thinking, it's interesting we've signed Claudia Pina and Aitana Bonmati. It's nice that they've dropped down to WSL2. Talking about them instead. You'll have to come back next week to see. But
the fact that they're signing, the fact that they're trying to sell the whole club for 200 million.
Yeah.
Like, those two players alone, you could probably pay like, they've got wages as well, like over like a 3-year, 4-year contract, you'd be looking at like,
I mean,
pushing like 10 maybe?
Yeah, I dread to think how, there will be players being sold this summer where you could be like, 1.5 Enzo Fernandez's or the entirety of Leicester City, which doesn't feel like an exactly fair currency exchange rate, but it's the world we live in. And on that kind of depressing philosophical note, we'll say goodbye. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.